Good morning. Okay. We touch the floor to remember that wherever we are, wherever we stand, wherever we sit, it is holy ground. We reach for the sky. We reach for the water to remember that we are part of a mystery that is much bigger than ourselves. And we hold hands to remember that we need one another and that we are part of one great family. To join voices, to remember that we each have a gift to offer to the world and to use our gifts in making the world a better place. And the words are from Lisa Friedman. Now, we have a responsive reading, which I think you will see. There it is. This is 540 in your gray hymn book. Now, the custom is I do the first few words and we join together for the italics. Reading 540. Today, the peace of autumn pervades the world. In the radiant noon, silent and motionless, the wide stillness rests like a tired bird. Spreading over the deserted fields to all horizons, its wings of golden green. Today the thin thread of the river flows without song, leaving no mark on its sandy banks. The many distant villages bask in the sun with eyes closed in idle and languid slumber. In the stillness I hear every blade of grass. In every speck of dust, in every part of my own body, in the visible and invisible worlds, in the planets, the sun, and the stars, the joyous dance of the atoms through endless time. This is the day for our water communion. I know the congregation has had water communions in the past. This one may be a little bit different, but then, of course, much has changed in this country, really just in the last few months, even in the last few days. So we've adapted somewhat to changing circumstances. What'll happen is easy to explain. Yes, sir.
The speakers were first.
Oh, speakers, okay. Of course. I'm going to introduce the three speakers. We'll have Jean Kelly first, Jamie Rowe, and Ruth Morris will each speak, and I hope that each speaker has some water to contribute to the fish bowl, or the communion bowl. What do we call it? I don't know. The glass bowl that hangs in front of the podium. Each speaker will speak for a few minutes, and each speaker has something to share with the congregation, and each speaker will talk about things that can involve volunteers and projects that need your support. Afterwards, we're going to sing a very famous campfire song, Kumbaya. Okay, you all know that song. It's actually in our hymn book. You need to know the words. I think you all know the words. I will say a few words after Kumbaya, including some words that explain why we chose this particular song for a water communion. And then after I conclude my remarks, you're all invited to come forward if you so choose. What'll happen will be a little bit like the stone ritual, where people come forward, but instead of putting a stone in a bowl, you're asked to put some water in the communion bowl. Silence is very much appreciated, but you may want to say a few words. It's really your call, your choice. We'll sing a closing hymn, and then we'll have coffee together. The water that's collected in the communion bowl will be given back to Mother Earth after the Sunday service. That too is an important part of what we do on Water Communion Sundays. Now, without further ado, I invite our first speaker to come forward Gene Kelly. No.
Good morning, everyone. The illustrations you see are from the book I wrote, The Common Ground Garden. It's a guide to help you grow a container garden. You can grow food anywhere. I have a garden on my patio by my RV. Today we are celebrating water. Life would not exist without it. The food we grow depends on water. To grow a plant, you need 4 things: a seed, water, soil, and mycorrhizal fungus, which is a magical fungus which lives in all healthy soil. Plants can grow without soil, but they cannot grow without water. I've always considered a seed to be magic. The teeniest seeds can grow a beautiful plant thousands of times bigger than the original seed. A plant that can provide us with food, food for other creatures, and even more seeds. This is an apple tree. It came from a tiny seed. Depending on what species of plants you're growing, it can produce a few seeds to thousands of seeds for the next generation of plants. The seed has all the information it will ever need to know how to grow, how to turn and face the sun, how and when to produce fruit, flowers, seeds, or offspring. Audrey Hepburn once said, "To plant a garden is to believe in tomorrow." The longest period a plant has grown from a preserved seed is approximately 32,000 years. In 2012, Russian scientists regenerated a flowering plant, Selene stenophylla, from seeds stored by squirrels in the Siberian permafrost during the Ice Age. And yet, we laughed at, okay, we missed our slide, but it's okay. And yet we laughed at the squirrel in the movie Ice Age. He was doing science. There he is. Those seeds stayed dormant until they had the other ingredients to make magic. Regardless of what medium those scientists used to grow seeds, they had to have water. Every single plant can produce more than enough seeds for the next year's crop, keeping you fed, keeping you alive. I'm about to perform magic. I have gathered these seeds from my garden. I collected water during the last rainstorm. The soil came from my garden and it becomes richer every year. When thunderstorms happen, nitrogen molecules get broken apart by lightning, and then they get dissolved into the rain, and the rain brings the nitrogen down to the soil. So every storm is fertilizing the soil. Every crop builds up the soil by giving nutrients and giving more mycorrhizal fungus to the soil, all of which only happens because of water. In a few weeks, the little plant will break through the soil, and if it gets the water it needs, the magic will repeat itself, just as it always has done for the last 360 million years. Once again, the magic will happen. And if anybody is interested in a guide to container gardening, see me after the service. Thank you.
Our second speaker comes forward, Jamie Rogue.
Well, that was lovely. That was cool. I'm here to talk about something that is near and dear to my heart, which is hurricanes. And surprisingly, I've also been writing a book about hurricane preparedness, which I call The Day Before Disaster, A Procrastinator's Guide to Hurricane Preparedness. So I've been writing this book for months. I'm getting a cover done by one of my daughters, who's an artist. But anyway, I'm also with Alex Venari. We're both the hurricane liaison people that volunteered to do that here. But before I tell you what we're doing with that, I'll tell you some fun facts about hurricanes, because I go every week to Lettuce Lake Park, and I've been doing this for years, basically. And after the hurricanes last year, there are just tons of trees everywhere. And it's been an amazing experience to watch these trees over the year, basically. And to us, a hurricane is a disaster, but really it's just part of nature. So it's these trees, when you go over to Lettuce Lake Park and you look at it, and the trees are knocked down, the hurricane's still going on. A hurricane is an event to us, but it's just part of the continuum of nature. The trees that fell all through our campus that cost thousands of dollars to cut down and everything was a disaster. But if we were just able to leave them to rot and become part of the soil, and millions of years, it's been going on and on. But here's some fun facts about hurricanes. I look up in the sky. I like to look at the dome too, because it reminds me of the sky. But you see clouds up there, okay? Has anyone ever wondered how much water is in a cloud? Okay. It is an amazing amount of water. Okay, so your smaller cloud has 131,000 gallons of water floating around up there. Okay? A thunderstorm has 275 million gallons of water. Okay, and to illustrate what water is like, water, if you imagine 1 inch of rain, okay, that happens sometimes, 1 inch of rain on 1 square mile. So believe me, I've done all the math here because I'm an engineer. So there's basically a 17.4 million gallons of water fall in a 1 inch rainstorm in 1 square mile. Now, Hillsborough County that we live in is 1,000 square miles. So you start seeing some water adding up. But if you go in, that's 145 million pounds of water, because water weighs 8.34 pounds per gallon. So if you ever go backpacking or something, it's hard to carry your water supply. And you're supposed to have 1 gallon of water in a hurricane situation, store 1 gallon of water per day per person. So you can see it adds up a lot. But if you divide that 145 million pounds by the average weight of an African elephant, that's 15,000 elephants have fallen in that one storm, okay? And yeah, how much does a hurricane have? Well, meteorologists actually measure with the remote sensing that we have. They can tell how much water has fallen through a whole hurricane event. There's more water than this, but this is the water that falls on the ground. So Helene in 2024, it dropped 40 trillion gallons of water. That's 40 with 12 zeros behind it. So if you add that up, that's 33 trillion pounds of water, which would be 33 billion elephants of water. So you can see that it's not that there's any malice or anything that nature's doing to us. It's just that the scale is just massive. So we're just a little human being with so many pounds of water in us, and we're up against it. But one thing we can do is mindset. That's the main thing for preparing and doing things. So if we mindfully join with the other UU churches and the other community groups out there, we can help each other and help them and help ourselves. So Alex and I are going to be, we've been talking, and I've been working on the new website for the church too, and I've incorporated a community element to that website. So we'll be able to get on your phone. I'll show you how this works over the next weeks, but we'll be able to have a way to tell each other, hey, I'm okay, or I had to evacuate, or I need something, and then we can all get together. So anyway, I hope that you enjoy the water service. Oh, if you have any questions afterwards, Alex and I will be available, and we will be working on this hurricane stuff over time.
I have done a lot of disaster preparedness work and disaster response work with the UUA for over 30 years. I've worked with the Red Cross, Salvation Army, CERT teams. The list goes on and on and on. I have never heard of any UU congregation anywhere that is this far along in disaster planning. Thank you, Jamie, Halleck, and others. This congregation may be a model for other congregations. Second point, scientists, of course, throughout the hurricane season are always looking at recent experience, trying to anticipate what's going to happen next, adjusting and readjusting forecasts. Last week, the consensus among climate scientists was there's probably something over a 60% chance that Florida will be hit by a hurricane before November 30th. 60%, a little bit higher than that. Whether it's going to hit Jacksonville, Miami, Tampa Bay, nobody knows, but that is something to keep in mind. Okay, kumbaya. It's adapted from the Gullah Geechee culture, those words, and we'll say more about the Gullah Geechee culture in just a few minutes. But first, we need to know that this is a hurricane song, or it's what Unitarian Universalists call a hurricane song. A hurricane song, well, it's frequently a campfire song, but it's very well known. It's frequently a song that provides inspiration. It might, in some cases, actually be a marching song, but it tries to move us along in the right sort of way. And they're called hurricane songs because, well, they're often sung when the power goes out, the electricity fails, the system goes down, and maybe we gather in the church parking lot or outside of a community center or a food pantry or whatever, and somebody says, oh, yeah, maybe we could sing some songs together, and, well, what are we going to sing? You know, we don't have hymn books. People have different songs. They come from different traditions. So we try to find something that's easy to sing. If you don't know the words, well, you can learn it pretty easily. And that's a hurricane song, not just for big storms, the aftermath of big storms, but maybe other disasters as well. And one of the classic of the hurricane songs is Kumbaya, which some of you may have learned in elementary school or at summer camp. Now we come back to this question that you may be asked this afternoon. What did the minister talk about? Okay, how are you going to summarize it? Well, you might say that we had a water communion and we sang Kumbaya, and then the minister did something unusual, this particular minister. I spoke from a manuscript because some very difficult things have happened recently. In a manuscript, some written notes seem appropriate. I will type these notes out. I will send them out during the coming week, and you can share them or whatever. But we'll talk a little bit about water communions. We'll talk about the Gullah Geechee people, and we'll talk about some of the problems that are happening right now in this country, and we'll try to be helpful. And that's what we try to do as Unitarian Universalists. We try to be helpful. So let me read the manuscript. Have to pull it out here. Side with love. Side with love. Unitarian Universalist covenant to learn from one another in our free and responsible search for truth and meaning. We embrace our differences and our commonalities with love, curiosity, and respect. And we declare that every person is inherently worthy and that every person has the right to flourish with dignity, love, and compassion. As Unitarian Universalists, we support the use of inclusive democratic processes to make decisions within our congregations, in our national association, and in society at large. We cultivate a spirit of gratitude and hope. And you'll find that message in the bylaws and rules for our National Unitarian Universalist Association. These statements help to explain our association. They help to explain who we are, what we represent, and what it is that we want to do. And it's not always easy to proceed in the right way. There are some challenges. Today we acknowledge the murder of Charlie Kirk. And we acknowledge the political violence that exists in the United States. We know that Charlie Kirk was assassinated. And we know that there are other people who have also been murdered because of their political beliefs and practices. And some of them you may identify with the left wing, and some you may identify with the right wing, and in some cases it's really not clear where they're coming from or what they wanted to do or why they did it. And in some ways, at least at this moment in religion, in some ways it really doesn't matter, because we try to affirm the inherent worth and dignity of everybody. And we say, if you want justice, work for peace. Try to defend the rights of everybody. And everybody means everybody. We should all feel a deep sense of grief, loss, and outrage at the terrible violence that has happened in several places during recent days. Our thoughts and prayers should be with Charlie Kirk's family, children, and loved ones. And again, we need to remember other people who have also suffered and died because of political violence. Unitarian Universalists side with love. Governor Gavin Newsom happens to be a Roman Catholic in California. Governor Newsom has said the best way to honor Charlie Kirk's memory is to engage with each other across ideology through spirited discourse, never through violence. Honest disagreement makes us stronger, and violence only drives us further apart and corrodes the values at the heart of this nation. Governor Spencer Cox in Utah happens to be a Mormon. Governor Cox reminds us, or asks Americans, to choose a different path by seeking dialogue over violence. He tells us that Charlie Kirk's death has highlighted the broken state of our nation. And Governor Cox reminds us again that words, not violence, should be used for disagreement. I agree with these statements by Governor Cox and by Governor Newsom, and I recommend both statements to my fellow Unitarian Universalists. In part because we need to understand that we live in a world in which there is too much violence. And again, to work for peace, we must work for justice. To work for justice and peace, we must work in the right sort of way with others, including and especially some people who may be very different from the people who we typically meet in our Unitarian Universalist congregations. Amen. Now, I'm going to ask Mary for some help. Mary, if you could reach for that mason jar with the gold top and just pour it into that communion bowl. The water that Mary is pouring is from the coast of South Carolina. This is Gullah Geechee country. The Gullah Geechee people are African American people who are involved with the coastal culture that extends from the St. Augustine area in Florida all the way up towards Wilmington, North Carolina. Thank you. Okay, thank you. Gullah Geechee country. Gullah Geechee people are the descendants of people who were enslaved in West Africa and Central Africa way back in the 1800s before the American Civil War. Some of them subsequently intermarried with Native American people and with others. Their culture continues. It's a very distinct culture. Historically, the Gullah Geechee corridor, the coast outside of urban areas like Savannah anyway, Jacksonville, it's been somewhat isolated. And there really wasn't a lot of contact with other cultures for Gullah Geechee people, at least historically. It's a Creole culture, includes a number of influences, that has developed over a period of, well, certainly over 150 years. For several reasons, the Gullah Geechee people have been involved with the Unitarians and nowadays with the Unitarian Universalists. The story begins during the American Civil War, the American Civil War of the 1860s, that is. Now, the Union Army captured areas like Beaufort, the Port Royal area, and the coast of South Carolina at a very early date in the Civil War. And those of you who've seen the movie Glory, how many of you have seen that movie or remember that movie, Denzel Washington? I recommend that movie to you because certainly many of the white characters you're going to see in that movie were famous Unitarians, or the characters that are based on famous Unitarians who were in the South, including people like Thomas Higginson and some others. So you get some insight, at least sort of from the white point of view, of what was happening in Gullah Geechee country during the 1860s. You meet some abolitionists and some others. One of the things that Unitarians did, in combination with Quakers, Gullah Geechee people, and others who came into the area, was we established programs during the Civil War for the education of enslaved people, for land redistribution, that was anticipated, and for what we would now call community organization. And that tradition continues. Unitarians and now Unitarian Universalists have learned a lot along the way. We've had some success stories. We've made some mistakes. There have been disappointments. And the story continues. Now, you need to know, as part of the story of Reconstruction, some of you already know this. In 1865, when General Sherman arrived on the coast, General Sherman made many promises that he couldn't keep, as it turned out. He promised all kinds of support for people who had been enslaved, who had stayed on the land. And some of you know the famous stories about 40 acres and a mule. Okay? It was rumored that every family that had been enslaved was going to receive 40 acres and an army mule. And the land will be your land because you've worked on it. The plantation owners have run away. Now it's going to be your land. And that was promised in 1865 by General Sherman, and within a matter of weeks, the promise was pulled back. It was revoked. Unitarians, Quakers, others were puzzled by the situation. What happened? We're supposed to be on the eve of Reconstruction. We're supposed to rebuild the South. Everybody, regardless of race, is supposed to enjoy this new prosperity that's coming. Everybody is supposed to participate in a democratic society to enjoy the benefits. And yet, it really didn't happen. Not in the ways expected, not in the ways that were needed, that were wanted. And all of this is part of our story, and it's part of the story of other people in different cultures. The work of the Penn Center, supported by Unitarians, Quakers, other religious groups, continues to the present day. I visited the Penn Center recently with my wife, Lynn. We spent some time in the Beaufort area. I collected some water from the coast, which is now in the communion bowl. And I listened to different stories, and I learned a few things. I learned how difficult it has been to make good on what has been promised for reparations and restorative justice. That struggle continues in a new era. On the coast of South Carolina, North Carolina, Georgia, Florida, gentrification has appeared in many places, and that adds to the challenges that are involved with environmental justice. Basic agricultural practices have become more difficult, and of course we could talk about climate change and some other topics that need attention. We could talk about hurricanes. The Penn Center continues to educate, to help organize. It's involved in a variety of issues nowadays in Gullah Geechee country. I've mentioned environmental justice, but I could also mention the rights of LGBTQ plus people, the rights of women, the need to help people as they find new career opportunities, and the list continues. The Penn Center and similar places are still active, and Unitarian Universalists are involved. Although the Penn Center, and rightfully so, is managed by African Americans, as it should be. When I was in Gullah Geechee country, I learned how difficult it has been to tell the story of Reconstruction, the need for reparations and restorative justice, and related stories. It's always been difficult to tell that story. And there's always been some strong opposition in Congress and in other places. During Obama's administration, there was an attempt made, a successful attempt, to establish museums at federal expense. These are national monuments that would tell the story, that would try to explain to the public what happened and what continues to happen for restorative justice, environmental justice, and reparations. Some of those museums are, well, in Beaufort and close by, and the Penn Center is involved. Nowadays, well, there are some people who don't like those museums, who want to close them down or at least restrict what they do. So there have been objections, for example, to presenting portraits of Harriet Tubman, who worked much further north with the Underground Railroad. She was never involved, as far as I know, with Port Royal and the Penn Center, but she represents the resistance to systemic racism that continued and continues to this day in many places. Resistance workers, people who question the system, people who educate, who organize, have become very unpopular in Congress in some places. And certainly there's a lot of opposition nowadays to diversity, equity, and inclusion programs. And this, too, is something that Unitarian Universalists need to know. I'm going to close with words about kumbaya. Now, political leaders sometimes smile and say, well, kumbaya, that's not a political program. We need a clear manifesto. We need to know point by point by point exactly what it is that we propose to do. And then we need to know how we're going to do it to create social justice. We need a political plan. And of course, at some level, the political leaders are, quite correct, and I'm sympathetic and supportive. But there's a little bit more that needs to be said. For religious organizations especially, and especially during a crisis like we now face, there is simply a need to come together at appropriate moments without necessarily talking about political platforms, and without being too judgmental. We try to help each other. We try to be with each other. And we share stories, and sometimes we share hurricane songs. And Kumbaya is probably one of the best known. It's a gentle song. It won't change Congress. I don't think it'll change the White House. But it may change your hearts, and it may keep you moving in the right sort of way. And that's what's really important, especially at religious events. And it's one of the reasons we sing Kumbaya. The song comes from Gullah Geechee country. Well, actually, it probably has its roots in many places, including Africa, and there are versions that have gone back and forth across the Atlantic. And there are people who say, well, maybe the song came from Virginia. One woman once said it came from California, and she wrote it, okay, back in the 20th century. Okay, well, anyway, you can believe what you want to believe. But most folklorists would say, now, this is a song heavily influenced by the Gullah Geechee people. Early versions noted back at the time of the Civil War, because many of the Unitarians who came down during the Civil War down to South Carolina, I guess we have to say up to South Carolina if we're in Florida, right? Further north, okay. Collected songs that were being sung. Michael Row the Boat Ashore, that's one of the ones you also know, and even We Shall Overcome may have its roots in Gullah Geechee land. So these songs were collected a long time ago, all kinds of variations, written and rewritten, and they survive. And during moments of crisis, we share stories, and we also sing some songs, like Kumbaya. Namaste. And I will put that manuscript together, and I will send it out by next Sunday, and you can have it for your records and whatever you want. Now, at this point in the water communion service, we invite everybody to come forward who has water to pour into the bowl. And again, it's a little bit like the stone ritual that we had earlier. Please come forward and just pour a cup of water or whatever you have into the glass bowl. And then afterwards, we will have some closing words and a final hymn. Thank you.
And if you didn't bring any water, there's water up here that you can use.
Thank you. After today's Sunday service, the water will be taken outside and given back to Mother Earth. And I have a final reading, and I ask for some help in extinguishing the chalice. Always a bit more water, okay. And stay hydrated, I have to tell you that too. All right, okay, thank you.
Our beautiful golf course.
Okay, thank you. Oh. Okay. Didn't we change that, or didn't we change it? But now we'll change it. All right, we're back again, whatever. The Spirit of life, you speak to us from the east and the west. You speak to us from the north and the south. You call to us from the depths of our being, and we respond with enthusiasm and fervor. We cry out from Manila to Maui, and we shout from Alaska to Alabama. We proclaim your wondrous love from the highest mountain to the deepest ocean. Our voices must be heard. We will not be silent. We will share our songs and our stories with others. Namaste.